Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to episode 3 of VR Roundup. Today is Tuesday. The date is October the 24th, 2017. Got a fantastic show tonight. Going to start things off talking about a specific game, but before we do, just gaming in general. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I like a lot of different genres. My favorite RPGs at the top of the list, no doubt, followed probably turn-based and strategy RTS games, whether that's your Dawn of War or your Civilization. Those would probably be under that, but really everything is fair game. The only real exception to that, pay-to-plays and freemium style games. Not as a rule, there are exceptions, but for the most part, not a fan of that whole model, and it kind of taints the experience for me. But just like with movies, sometimes I want to turn my brain off. It doesn't have to be a serious thing. Case in point, my buddy Exidy and me, Japanese splatter gore films, love them. Turn your brain off entertainment. Archer, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, etc. Well, that extends to gaming as well. For example, developer The Monkey releasing a game called Drunken Bar Fight about a year ago. Okay, look, it's not going to win awards for pretty much any category other than maybe absurdist humor, and I'm okay with that. Just like I don't watch every movie hoping for it to be an Oscar nominee, I also don't always play games expecting them to kind of be the equivalent of a red carpet event. Well, The Monkey updated their game last week to include scenarios like the romantic wedding reception. The Peter Sellers movie, The Party from 1964, isn't the most politically correct movie ever made, but watching his character not just crash a party uninvited, but completely and utterly trash it within 90 minutes, guys, it is a guilty viewing pleasure of mine to this day. And continuing the comparison to movies, Drunken Bar Fight's gameplay, to me, is the gaming equivalent of that movie, The Party, only instead of Peter Sellers running around, it's Robert Carlyle and his character, Begbie from Trainspotting. In fact, had The Monkey somehow been able to get Carlyle's involvement in this project and been able to market as a, type of Begbie simulator, complete with Begbie throwing around his Begbieisms, I can guarantee you it would be a top seller on Steam. This is a game I'm probably going to revisit via the Quick Look series, which, yes, is going to be making a comeback shortly. Along with the completely Looney Tunes wedding reception, the update also includes 2 new bars as well as 20 new characters. Next up, we just celebrated the PlayStation VR's first birthday. We discussed the new model, which is already out in Japan. Well, it appears that Sony has now discontinued the initial PlayStation VR model. So they're going all in with the new headset. Anyone concerned about features that will date your current PlayStation VR headset, I can say, don't worry. Most companies are going to ensure that new iterations of the technology that come out during the life cycle of a product are going to be cosmetic, not strictly technical. In fact, usually not very technical at all for that very reason, not wanting to alienate their user base. There's exceptions, like the new 3DS, for example, but the end result of that, looking at that example, is just a handful of games that actually support the new processor natively. You've got Xenoblade Chronicles. Then you've got a subset of games that basically cater to what was the Circle Pad Pro. Beyond that, the vast majority of games play exactly as they did before. And that's how I see it with Sony's new PlayStation VR. The added features, mostly cosmetic. Sure, you've got the HDR pass-through, but chalk that up similarly to the new 3DS processor. The last thing Sony wants to do is split their growing VR user market base with a bunch of technical features and create a group of haves and then another group of have-nots. So cosmetic for the most part. And this next story, PIMAX pummeling, absolutely pummeling the $2 million US mark in their Kickstarter. They've still got 10 days remaining. They've got some really cool stretch goals for the $2.5 million mark. They want to create a conference for virtual reality devs. Yeah, that one is just so-so. This next one I like, though. They want to further integrate PIMAX SDK to enable use of Steam VR and Oculus Home via their Pi Home interface. So their own ecosystem being the main launch point for those titles when that's all worked out at launch. Now, despite the loose advertising for the terms 4K and 8K, and we've talked about that, it's in their name, it's in their literature, the field of view and the rendering techniques, they've really piqued my interest. And I'm going to try to get one of these in the future, probably before I get the Samsung Variety HMD. My views on Kickstarters, all of that still applies, if anything, more so. If for some reason these guys don't live up to their claims and falsities come to light down the road, believe me, guys, I will be holding them to task. But for now, it's a wait-and-see game. We're going to judge it when it's out and in our hands. Then next up, we have Acer investing $5 million US. Starbreeze and Acer announcing today that a new capitalization plan has been agreed for StarVR and themselves. Under the agreement, Acer is going to invest $5 million US into the joint venture and increase its interest to 66.7%. Starbreeze will be relieved from its remaining capital commitment of $7.5 million, and its interest is going to be 33.33%. So effectively, Acer becomes majority shareholder, and as a majority owner, they're going to be able to facilitate future financing on behalf of StarVR should the need arise. And what interests me about this, guys, is the agreement with regards to intellectual property. If you look at the intellectual property that both companies have, they really do complement each other. As a duo, I think it's going to work out great. You've got Acer with its many engineering and design patents, and then Starbreeze, for their part, patents related to stuff like Infinite Eye, EPON, and of course, the StarVR SDK. And speaking of RPGs earlier, an RPG open world called Planetrism is going to support both the Rift and the Vive, the product of Finnish developer duo Mika Laaksonen and Kimmo Kanela. The game is set about 200 years in the future, and it's a not post-apocalyptic, but post-natural resource depleted Earth. And according to the devs, open world with very long story arcs alongside your typical smaller MMO-style courier quests. You know, go from point A to point B to C and back to A, etc. One of the devs, and I've got the link below, has quite a few videos on his YouTube channel dealing with the game if you want to take a more in-depth look. The RPG aspect, just based on descriptions, skill-based, very much in line with an EVE Online or Skyrim. It's being built via the Unreal 4 engine and is going to support both Windows and the Mac OS platforms. No release date, no price as of yet. Definitely a game I'm going to keep my eyes out on, though. One of the things I get asked a lot is, Epix, what's your opinion on product A or product B in terms of having a negative impact on virtual reality? Don't you think it's going to taint the industry and ruin it and create, just poor expectations and perception about VR? And my counter to that usually is people in general, although with some of the stuff floating around, which we won't get into, you can question that, but people generally smart enough when it's something that they're interested in, they're going to do the basic research or at least pass the basic roadblocks. For example, somebody getting into VR, well, they're going to watch a YouTube channel like mine, for example, somebody else's. They're going to do subreddits. They're going to be able to cobble enough information together, usually, to understand that something like a cardboard is not in the same league as a Rift or a Vive without even really understanding the technology completely. And sometimes it's friends or family that provide additional roadblocks. There is an exception to that, and we're going to get right back to that. But first, an example I bring up from time to time is my hobby of amateur astronomy, one of my hobbies. When you first get into astronomy, you don't know about stuff like focal length or light gathering ability due to aperture diameter. Most stores don't carry telescopes, so when you do see them in stores when you're starting out, they're marketed with buzzwords like power or magnification. Up in the pip window, perfect example, or full screen, note the use of the 525 power tagline. Well, once you actually get into astronomy, you quickly learn that any telescope that advertises power or magnification is a reason to run in the opposite direction. The issue I have is with kids. Many kids don't know enough to do the research. They'll simply tell mom and dad, who bring little Sally or Johnny one of the units home for whatever holiday it is, right? Or event. Well, here is the virtual reality equivalent of exactly that. Skyscope company has a product out called Batman VR SE. It's a head-mounted display. And going back when I said there's one exception, here's that exception. Note the marketing savvy lifted straight from Saturday morning cartoon commercials. It's an appeal to kids that bypasses all of those road checkpoints that I talked about earlier. When you're a little bit older, those subreddits, and look, some kids are going to be just fine, right? Talking about the very young and impressionable, a lot of those roadblocks are going to get missed. Little Sally or Johnny hears about VR via a commercial. Skyrocket Batman commercial during a break on one of their favorite kid shows. They then go to mom or dad. 2 months later, it's wrapped and is a present. Sally and Johnny, for their part, they're happy for about 5 minutes. They even manage to get mom, dad, or great uncle Azhul to try it. And that is where the danger is. Again, all of those natural road checks are avoided, and yes, false perception is spread. So what can be done about this? Well, hopefully resources like this that are online, that are going to be part of whatever filter the kid or the parent uses, and hopefully some sanity, some logic, some reason gets injected into that decision, and well, they don't end up with a unit like that. And look, if it looks like I'm slagging on this unit as cruft, try to find specs on it. Basically, the reviews say the field of view is abysmal. You've got the one application natively for it. Sorry, to me, it's the equivalent of that department store telescope advertising magnifying power. There are really no redeeming qualities other than perhaps as a prop, some kind of prop for a video. Sure, that would be great, but I think a better gift would be, letting little Sally or Johnny try your VR for an hour or two. But then again, if they have a U in the first place, they're probably not going to go down that path where it becomes an issue. So yeah, that is the type of product that scares the bejesus out of me. Not the cardboards of the world and these other products, but the ones targeting a very young and specific demographic. Well, guys, that is it for this episode. We are going to catch you guys again for the Game and Friday episode in a few days. Guys, as always, cheers.